Syria is facing a nationwide crisis in a lot of ways these days. Their already hurting economy has taken another hard hit due to the pandemic, resulting in millions of Syrian people being displaced, having no homes. Add to the fact that Lebanon, their neighbor and investor, is having their currency tanked, and you're beginning to understand just how severe the situation is. So the last thing that Syria needs right now is another round of hard-hitting, economically punishing sanctions from the US, but that is exactly what they're getting. If the US goes ahead with the sanctions to Syria, and it looks like they will create a migrant crisis dwarfing the one that we saw a few years ago. Europe can't handle another wave bigger than the last one, especially right now. Greece, Italy, and Spain would be utterly crushed by it. So what's going to happen from here? And why is all of this happening to Syria right now? Let's take a look at that in today's video. Alright, so Syria is used to disasters by now. I think we can all agree on that. But the timing of these US sanctions could cripple them in a way that it's really difficult to come back from. Now, you might be thinking that Syria is a faraway country in the Middle East and it won't have any effect on the rest of the world as a whole. But this not only could, but will lead to another migrant crisis that is way bigger than the last one we saw a couple of years ago. It's gonna send wave after wave of immigrants into Europe, and this time Turkey won't stop them. And it's not really being covered in the news, but we already have a crisis on our hands. Countries in Europe are being overrun from refugees from Syria, North Africa, and a few other countries. So when you take a look at the countries involved, it's safe to say that we already have a crisis on our hands, and it's about to get a lot worse. Alright, so before we get into this article from CNN, I will just quickly outline the main factors of why Syria is in the disaster that it's in right now. Among the top things that are pressuring Syria right now is Lebanon's crashing currency. Lebanon has billions and billions of assets in Syria, and so if the currency in Lebanon falls, chances are so will Syria's. You see, the economy in Syria is heavily reliant on foreign aid. Most of that money will come from places like the US, but a good portion of it comes from Lebanon. So the timing of the US sanctions couldn't have come at a worse time, and that is of course the point. So let's read this article on why the US is doing what it's doing right now. The headline reads, "As the US rolls out new sanctions on Assad, Syria braces for economic devastation." The United States has rolled out fresh sanctions that aim to drive Syrian President Bashar al-Assad back to a UN-led negotiating table and threaten to devastate Syria's already floundering economy. On Wednesday, the US State Department and Treasury Department released 39 targets for sanctions, including Assad and his wife Asma al-Assad, marking, quote, "the beginning of what will be a sustained campaign of economic and political pressure to deny the Assad regime revenue and support its users to wage war and commit mass atrocities against the Syrian people," Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said in a statement, the US Secretary of State. "We anticipate many more sanctions, and we will not stop until Assad and his regime stop their needless, brutal war against the Syrian people and the Syrian government agrees to a political solution to the conflict as called for by UN SCR 2254, he said, referring to the UN Security Council resolution calling for a ceasefire and political settlement in Syria. The first tranche of economic penalties come as part of the newly enforced CISA Syria Civilian Protection Act, which is expected to trigger the most wide-reaching and aggressive economic penalties ever imposed on Syria, potentially targeting its energy, construction, and banking sector. The most aggressive economic pressure ever imposed on Syria right now in these times. Out of all of the things the West could possibly do to hurt Syria, this, and they have done most of them, this is probably on top of the list. The country is already broken. Millions of people without homes, a barely functioning economy, and an ongoing fight with the pandemic. So these sanctions, especially if they are the worst ever imposed, will give Syria very few chances to actually ever recover. I mean, it used to be that the US would just straight up bomb these Middle Eastern countries, take their natural resources, and then move on to the next one. Or, as they call it, instill democracy. And if we're being real here, the US could make Assad do whatever they want him to do. So it kind of makes you feel like there's something else going on. Alright, let's read the last section down here. US Ambassador to the United Nations Kelly Craft told the Security Council on Tuesday the move was a bid to, quote, prevent the Assad regime from securing a military victory and to steer the regime and its allies back towards Special Envoy Peterson and the UN-led political process. Steering them back to the political process. That's a very nice way of saying it. Syria angrily hit back at the sanctions on Wednesday, saying the US move exceeds the ugliest forms of lies and hypocrisy. In a statement to state-run news agency SANA, Syria's Foreign and Expatriates Ministry. English is not my main language. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what expatriates mean. Expatriates. Udstationell. Okay, well, in Danish. I get it. Let's move on. Syria's Foreign and Expatriates Ministry also questioned U.S. moral authority in the light of recent widespread protests over the deaths of several black Americans in police custody. The U.S., it said, quote, is the last one who has the right to talk about the human rights because the U.S. administrations have established their state upon the culture of killing, disregarding any value of laws or conventions, it said. Last section here. China and Russia also criticized the plan on Tuesday. China's UN ambassador Zhang Yun called the sanctions inhumane. Russia's UN ambassador Vasily Nebansia accused Washington of attempting to overthrow the legitimate authorities of Syria, according to Reuters. So normally I don't buy into much of what comes out of the spokespeople of China, but it is tempting to buy into their propaganda this time. So the consequences of this outside of Syria is that a huge migrant crisis, bigger than the one we saw last time, is on its way right now and already arriving, but the main part of it is coming to Europe very soon. I covered the new migrant crisis in the last video I made, so I won't go too much into detail about it here, but if you're interested, feel free to check out the link that I will post to up here. So all of this does make you wonder why the EU will allow the US to sanction Syria at this time. I mean, anyone paying attention can see where this is going. Already now, in Europe, Italy, Greece, and Spain are rejecting the migrants who are coming in record numbers. In other words, Europe can't afford to have that big of a migrant wave come in, so they're gonna reject them at the borders. And if they have to reject them at the borders, which they are beginning to do now, all of these people coming all the dangerous journey from Syria to southern Europe will have to go back the same way they came from, literally being stuck at sea. So I want to end this video on a positive note because I don't want to leave you guys with a crabby feeling. So in the spirit of that, I do want to say that I think it's most likely by far that Syria will be forced into some kind of negotiation. They will settle politically, and then the US will lighten the sanctions and maybe even completely remove them. I mean, when they're being bullied as they are into submission, they don't really have a choice. At the end of the day, I do hope that Europe and countries beyond will help these massive homeless camps in Syria financially by creating a path forward for them. There really aren't a good solution to all of this, but if we do that at least, it could be the best solution. So tell me what you guys think in the comment section. Do you think that it's right to force Syria into compliance as they are doing right now? Or is there another way you can handle this? Let me know and I will get back to you. Remember also to subscribe to the channel if you like this video so you won't miss out on the future daily videos that I make. Thank you so much for watching and have a really good day.